It's 1876. The Ottoman Empire is in decline. They have lost much of their land, millions of Muslims have become refugees overnight, the Ottoman economy is about to collapse, and sultans are being overthrown left and right. But here comes Sultan Abdulhamid II, and what made him so different is that unlike our so-called Muslim leaders of today who oppress their own people for personal gain, Abdulhamid didn't compromise. When he was offered everything he wanted just to sell a tiny piece of land known today as Palestine, he refused. Even when the Ottomans were struggling, needing any help he could get, Abdulhamid first and foremost looked out for his own people. And despite all the odds, he kept the Muslim ummah, including Palestine, away from the West and Zionists for 30 years, something which would cost him the throne. This is the story of Abdulhamid II, the 34th Sultan of the Ottoman Empire and one of the last caliphs of Islamic history. The first thing that makes Abdulhamid a genuine Muslim leader was his love for the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When light bulbs were first invented, the very first place to have electric lights in the Ottoman Empire was not Abdulhamid's palace in Istanbul, but in Masjid al-Nabawi, the resting place of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not just that, but when constructing the Hejaz Railway, Abdulhamid ordered workers to cover every single hammer with cloth and cover the wheels of trains going by in Medina. This was to make less noise, out of respect for our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abdulhamid even took measures to protect the memory of the Prophet when he learned about the anti-Islam play Muhammad, which made vile statements about our beloved Prophet. Abdulhamid intervened and forced France to delay the play staging. Even when France claimed that the play was supposedly harmless, Abdulhamid persisted and made the play banned in not only France but also Great Britain. This just shows Abdulhamid's love for Islam and his commitment to protect the memory of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is where we get to arguably Abdulhamid's most ambitious project, the Hejaz Railway, which for the first time in human history connected Istanbul, Damascus and the holy city of Medina by rail. This was so important for two reasons. First of all, it revolutionized Hajj, which previously involved perilous journeys lasting weeks or even months. Many people would pass away long before they could even arrive in the cities of Mecca and Medina. But with the Hejaz Railway, pilgrims were able to travel to the holy cities just like that. Secondly, and most importantly, it finally united the Ottoman Empire, stretching all the way from Bosnia in Europe down to Yemen. If the Ottomans were to ever go to war, they could instantly mobilize the Muslims and quickly transport them across the empire in a matter of moments. What's fascinating is that despite costing a whopping 4 million Ottoman lira, this project was entirely funded by the Muslim Ummah, not just from the Ottoman Empire, but Muslims across North Africa, Persia, India, among many other Muslim communities across the world. Completed in 1908, it connected trade, commerce, laborers, soldiers, scholars, and pilgrims across the empire, showcasing that if we Muslims work together, the things we can achieve are monumental. However, undoubtedly, Abdulhamid's greatest legacy and the reason why he is beloved by Muslims today is his refusal to sell Palestine to the Zionist movement. For context, Jews living in Europe faced persecution for almost 2,000 years, convincing many of them to join a small movement known today as Zionism. Its leader, Theodor Herzl, who dreamed of a Jewish state in Palestine, knew that his greatest obstacle was none other than Abdulhamid II. In his personal diary, Herzl himself admitted that the fate of a Zionist state, quote, is in the sole hands of His Majesty the Sultan. So, in June 1896, Herzl's close friend Philip Nulinsky visited Abdulhamid in person and gave him a simple offer: 20 million British pounds for a charter allowing the Zionists to colonize Palestine. That may not sound much, but in today's money, that was worth a whopping $2.2 billion, enough to pay off a considerable chunk of the Ottoman Empire's debt. Nulinsky even boasted that without the help of the Zionists, the Turkish economy would not stand a chance of recovery. Abdulhamid had every reason to accept the offer and save his empire from crippling debt. However, what makes him so different from our so-called Muslim leaders today who sell out their own people for money, fame, and power is that he didn't compromise, because he knew that pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and serving his people was of the utmost importance. So in response, he refused Nulinsky's offer, famously saying, "I do not wish to sell even a tiny portion of my land because this country does not belong to me, it belongs to my people. My nation has watered this fatherland with its blood. The men of my Syrian and Palestinian contingents have all become martyrs at Plevna. All of them, without exception, have remained on the battlefield and did not return. I do not wish to give up any part of the Ottoman state. Let the Jews keep their millions. I cannot allow surgery on a living body." This surprised Theodor Herzl, so much so that just 2 years later, he decided to visit Abdulhamid himself with an even more tempting deal. A Jewish company would pay off all, not just some, all of the Ottoman Empire's debt in just 3 years. And in return, all that the Zionists wanted was to be allowed to settle into Palestine. Again, Abdulhamid didn't budge. He stuck to his principles and rejected this offer. But unfortunately, this is where the story takes a dark turn, because Abdulhamid's stance against Zionism did not go unpunished. Because on the 24th of July, 1908, he was toppled from power. In what became known as the Young Turk Revolution, a mostly secular and nationalist movement revolted against the Sultan. They succeeded, and Abdulhamid was stripped of most of his power. Many Muslims loyal to the Sultan rose up against the Young Turks in the following year. Outgunned and outnumbered, it failed, and they were executed on the streets of Istanbul. The Young Turks had enough. Not only was Abdulhamid deposed, but he was under house arrest for the rest of his life. The most shocking part of Abdulhamid's downfall was revealed in his final years of his life, when he wrote the reason why he was overthrown: his stance against Zionism. "I quit being caliph because of the oppression and threats by the Young Turks. This group insisted that I approve the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine. I rejected this proposition. They finally offered 150 million British gold pieces. I rejected this as well, and I told them, I would never agree with you even if you not offered 150 million British gold, while all the gold in the entire world. I served the Muslim community for more than 30 years. I did not let my forefathers down." Following my final response, they agreed on my dethronement and sent me to Thessaloniki. I prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I did not accept to establish a new state on Palestinian land, on the Ottoman state and the Islamic community. After Abdulhamid was deposed, in just 5 years alone, the Ottoman Empire lost Bulgaria, Bosnia, Libya, and the entire Balkan Peninsula. If that wasn't enough, the Young Turks then made the final and fatal decision to enter World War I. Ill-prepared and fighting on all fronts, they were no match for Britain, France, and Russia combined. The Ottoman Empire was crumbling apart. So much so that during the so-called Great Arab Revolt, the British and their Arab collaborators destroyed the Hejaz Railway. Once Abdulhamid's most ambitious project and a symbol of pride for the Muslim ummah was now left in ruins, left to rot in the middle of the desert. Witnessing all of this was Abdulhamid himself, who grieved that had I been ruling, I would have kept the Europeans fighting each other and the Muslims could have lived in peace. He was right, because on the 11th of December 1917, British troops entered Jerusalem, and just 2 months later, Abdulhamid passed away, and with that, the Ottoman Empire collapsed entirely. This is where I get to the point of the video. History is not just a bunch of stories that you learn in school. They are a lesson. Because when you look at our so-called Muslim leaders today, you'll realize that they are either collaborators of American imperialism or they are too scared to challenge it. And the one person that comes to mind is none other than Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Last year, when he won the Turkish elections, it was the Palestinians in Jerusalem and Gaza that were celebrating his victory. They held portraits of him, handed out sweets to children, believing that out of all the Muslim leaders we have today, Erdogan would protect the Palestinians. He would look out for the Muslim ummah. But with the current genocide in Gaza, when push came to shove, Erdogan has done nothing. Until very recently, all he has offered was empty threats towards Israel. That's it. But hey, when Azerbaijan needed help back in 2020 to fight against Armenia, Turkey happily jumped on board and sent it better weapons, soldiers and drones. But when it came to Palestine, crickets. This is not to say that Erdogan and most Muslim leaders in general are bad people. The problem, however, is that they only look out for their own people, their own countries, and their own interests. Nationalism is a cancer that is plaguing the Muslim world, and if we ever want to stop the genocide in Palestine, stop the suffering across the Muslim ummah, stop the division and infighting, we have to put our differences aside and work together. And that will only happen if we have leaders such as Abdulhamid II, someone who sacrificed his interests for his own people. Because while Abdulhamid lost everything, smeared as a brutal dictator for almost a century later, and died alone as the Ottoman Empire collapsed, he didn't compromise, he didn't sell out. And that's why Muslims love him till this very day. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant Abdulhamid II the highest levels of Jannah.